Sometimes the most important words we ever hear come in a whisper, barely audible above the chaos of life around us. Sometimes they arrive exactly when we need them most. And sometimes, heartbreakingly, they come 1 second too late to change everything. This is the story of 3 words that carried the weight of 20 years, spoken in the space between a heartbeat and a goodbye. In that fragile moment, when time itself seemed to pause and ask, what if? We all carry moments we wish we could revisit, words we wish we'd said differently, chances we let slip through our fingers like sand. But what happens when life offers us one final opportunity to make things right, and we almost miss it entirely? Gemma and I met in college during one of those crisp October afternoons when the campus seemed painted in gold and amber. She was sitting alone in the library, surrounded by towers of psychology textbooks, her dark hair catching the afternoon light streaming through the tall windows. I was supposed to be studying for my economics midterm, but instead I found myself watching her, mesmerized by the way she unconsciously tucked her hair behind her ear every few minutes, completely absorbed in whatever she was reading. It took me 3 weeks to work up the courage to approach her. 3 weeks of strategically choosing seats where I could steal glances, of timing my library visits to coincide with hers, of rehearsing conversations that never happened. When I finally walked over, my carefully planned opening line evaporated entirely. Instead, I simply asked if she minded if I sat down. She looked up with these incredible green eyes and smiled, really smiled, and said, "I was wondering when you'd finally ask." That was Gemma. Direct, intuitive, always seeing straight through to the heart of things while the rest of us stumbled around in the dark. We became inseparable almost immediately. Study sessions that stretched until dawn, long walks across campus, debating everything from existentialism to whether pineapple belonged on pizza. She challenged me in ways I'd never experienced, pushing me to think deeper, feel more, be better than I thought I could be. I was a practical, analytical person, the kind who planned everything 3 steps ahead. Gemma lived in the moment, trusted her instincts, embraced uncertainty as an adventure rather than a threat. For 2 years, we were that couple everyone either envied or found slightly nauseating. We finished each other's sentences, shared dreams that seemed to align perfectly, talked about the future as if it were a given rather than a hope. I was studying business with plans to eventually take over my father's accounting firm. Gemma was pursuing her doctorate in child psychology, determined to open a practice that would help kids navigate trauma and difficult family situations. But life has a way of testing even the strongest foundations. The cracks started small, almost imperceptible. I began spending more time with my father at his firm, learning the business, feeling the weight of family expectations settling on my shoulders like a heavy coat I couldn't take off. Gemma threw herself deeper into her studies, taking on research projects that kept her in the lab until midnight, writing papers that she'd excitedly try to explain to me over dinner, while my mind wandered to spreadsheets and client meetings. We started having the same argument repeatedly, though we never quite acknowledged it was the same argument. She'd want to spend a weekend volunteering at a local youth center. I'd have promised my father I'd help with inventory. She'd get excited about a conference in Portland where she could present her research. I'd worry about the expense and the time away from building my career. Little by little, we began to inhabit different worlds, even while sharing the same bed, the same apartment, the same daily routines. The breaking point came during our senior year. Gemma had been accepted to a prestigious PhD program at Stanford, a dream opportunity that would launch her career but take her 3,000 miles away from me and the life we'd built. I had an offer to join my father's firm immediately after graduation, with the understanding that I'd eventually become a partner. We tried to make it work long distance. For 6 months, we video called every night, visited each other whenever. We could afford the plane tickets, made plans and promises that became increasingly difficult to keep. But the distance wasn't just geographical. With each passing week, I could feel her slipping away, becoming someone new, someone I was struggling to recognize. Her conversations were full of research breakthroughs, new friendships, adventures I wasn't part of. My life, by comparison, felt increasingly small and predetermined. The final conversation happened on a Sunday evening in February. The connection was terrible. Her image kept freezing, the audio cutting in and out. She was trying to tell me about a research opportunity that would extend her program by another year, and I was trying to explain why I couldn't visit for another month because of tax season. We both grew frustrated, snapping at each other over technical difficulties that seemed to symbolize everything that was breaking between us. "Maybe we should take a break," she said during one of those moments when the video cleared and I could see her face clearly. She looked exhausted, sad, older somehow. Maybe we're both trying too hard to hold on to something that's already changed. Wanted to fight for us, to say all the things I'd been thinking but hadn't found the words for. Instead, I heard myself saying, "Maybe you're right." The words tasted like ash in my mouth, but they also felt like relief. The terrible relief of finally admitting what we'd both known for months. We said goodbye politely, formally, like strangers wrapping up a business call. I told her I hoped she'd be happy. She said she wished me all the best. Then the screen went black, and that was it. 24 months of love, dreams, and possibilities reduced to an ended video call and the hollow silence of my empty apartment. 20 years passed. 20 years of building the life I thought I wanted, of becoming the person everyone expected me to be. I married Mary, a wonderful woman who shared my practical approach to life. We had 2 kids, bought a house in the suburbs, built a stable, comfortable existence that looked exactly like success from the outside. I took over my father's firm, expanded it, earned the respect of my peers, and the financial security my family had always valued. But sometimes, late at night when I couldn't sleep, I'd find myself wondering about Gemma. Not in a way that threatened my marriage or my contentment, but in that quiet, persistent way we wonder about paths not taken, about the people who helped shape us into who we became. Then came the phone call that changed everything. It was my college roommate, Jake, calling to tell me that our 20-year reunion was coming up. I hadn't planned to attend. These things always felt forced and artificial to me, but something in his voice made me reconsider. "Gemma's going to be there," he said, and there was a pause. "Thought you should know." I told Mary about it that evening over dinner. She knew about Gemma, of course. Not every detail, but enough to understand that she'd been important to me. Mary was secure enough in our relationship, and wise enough about life, to simply say, "You should go. You'll regret it if you don't." The reunion was exactly what I'd expected. A hotel ballroom filled with people trying to prove how successful and happy they'd become, everyone looking older but pretending not to notice. I spent the first hour making small talk with classmates I barely remembered, nursing a beer, and wondering why I'd come. Then I saw her. Gemma was standing near the windows, talking to a small group of people, and the years seemed to collapse in on themselves. She looked different, older, of course, with fine lines around her eyes and silver threading through her hair, but unmistakably, completely herself. She was animated, gesticulating as she told some story, and the people around her were leaning in, captivated. She still had that gift, that ability to make everyone in her orbit feel like they were part of something special. Our eyes met across the room, and she smiled. Not the polite, measured smile of someone acknowledging an old acquaintance, but a real smile, warm and genuine and slightly surprised. She excused herself from her conversation and walked over. "Hello, stranger," she said, and her voice was exactly as I remembered it. Warm, slightly husky, with that hint of mischief that had always undone me. We talked for hours. Not about the past, not about what had gone wrong between us, but about our lives now. She told me about her practice, how she'd finally opened that clinic she'd dreamed about, working with kids who'd been through trauma. Her eyes lit up as she described a program she'd developed that was showing remarkable results. I found myself telling her about my family, my work, the community theater group I'd joined on a whim and discovered I loved. It was easy, natural, like slipping into a favorite shirt you'd forgotten you owned. We laughed about professors we'd had, remembered friends we'd lost touch with, marveled at how different we'd become while somehow still being recognizably ourselves as the evening wound down. We found ourselves outside the hotel, standing under the parking lot lights while other classmates said their goodbyes around us. The October air was crisp, reminding me of that first day I'd seen her in the library. "I should get going," she said, but she didn't move. "I have a flight to catch in the morning." "Back to Portland?" I asked, remembering that she'd ended up there after all these years. "For now. But I'm thinking about moving back east, maybe opening a second location for the practice." There was something in the way she said it, something that made me look at her more closely. In the artificial light of the parking lot, I could see uncertainty in her expression, vulnerability she was trying to hide. "Gemma," I started, but I didn't know how to finish. What was I trying to say? What was I allowed to say? She looked at me for a long moment, and I saw something shift in her expression. A decision being made, a wall being lowered. "I need to tell you something," she said, her voice quieter now, more serious. "Something I should have said 20 years ago." My heart began to race. Around us, car doors were slamming, engines starting, other people heading back to their real lives. But in that moment, it felt like we were the only two people in the world. "The night we broke up," she continued, "when we had that awful conversation over video chat, I wanted to say something different. I wanted to tell you that I loved you, that I thought we were making a mistake, that maybe we should try harder to make it work." She paused, looking down at her hands. "But the connection was so bad, and you seemed so ready to let go. And I lost my nerve." The words hit me like a physical blow. 20 years of wondering, of occasional regret, of paths not taken. And she'd wanted to fight for us too. "Gemma, But she was already backing away, reaching for her car keys. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said that. You have a family, a life. I needed you to know." She was at her car now, fumbling with the lock. And I realized with a sudden, desperate clarity that she was about to walk out of my life again. Maybe forever this time. I started toward her, my mouth opening to say something, anything, to stop her from leaving with this hanging between us. But she was faster. She got the door open, slid into the driver's seat. That's when it happened. The moment that would replay in my mind for years to come. She rolled down the window, looked at me one last time, and in a voice so soft I almost missed it over the sound of other cars leaving, she whispered, "Please forgive me." Then she was gone, her taillights disappearing into the night, leaving me standing alone in an empty parking lot with 3 words echoing in my head. I stood there for a long time after she left, replaying those final moments over and over. The weight of her whispered plea, the look in her eyes, the way she'd seemed to shrink into herself as she drove away. It all felt like a puzzle I needed to solve, a code I needed to crack to understand what had just happened. Please forgive me. 3 words that carried 20 years of regret, of what-ifs, of a burden she'd been carrying alone. But forgive her for what? For loving me? For wanting to fight for us when we were too young and scared to know how? For carrying that secret all these years? Or for finally finding the courage to share it when it was too late to change anything? The drive home was a blur. Mary was already asleep when I got in, and I was grateful. I needed time to process, to understand what I was feeling before I could even begin to explain it to anyone else. I sat in my kitchen in the dark, still wearing my reunion name tag, trying to make sense of the evening. The rational part of me. The part that had built a successful business, raised 2 kids, made responsible choices for 4 decades, knew that this changed nothing. I loved my wife. I was committed to my family. Gemma was a chapter from my past, a beautiful chapter, but one that had ended long ago for good reasons. But the heart doesn't always listen to reason. I found myself thinking about the concept of forgiveness, really thinking about it in a way I never had before. What Gemma was asking for wasn't absolution for some great sin. It was forgiveness for being human, for carrying regret, for loving someone so much that the loss of that love had marked her in ways that lasted decades. The truth was, there was nothing to forgive. We'd been kids, really, trying to navigate adult emotions and impossible circumstances. We'd both made choices based on fear. Fear of commitment, fear of uncertainty, fear of disrupting the lives we thought we were supposed to want. Those choices had shaped us, led us to become the people we were now. And while they'd caused pain, they'd also led us to good lives, meaningful work, love of different kinds. Over the next few days, I found myself distracted, going through the motions of my normal routine, while part of my mind remained in that parking lot, hearing her whispered words, seeing the vulnerability in her eyes. Mary noticed, of course. She always noticed. How was the reunion? She asked over breakfast on Wednesday, 3 days after I'd gotten home. I'd given her the basic details when I'd returned, who I'd seen, what people were up to now, but I hadn't mentioned Gemma specifically. Now, looking at my wife's kind, patient face, I knew I needed to tell her the truth. "I saw Gemma," I said simply. Mary set down her coffee cup and looked at me directly. And it was complicated. I told her about our conversation, about Gemma's confession, about the weight of those final words. Mary listened without judgment, occasionally asking gentle questions, but mostly just letting me work through it out loud. "It sounds like she needed to tell you," Mary said when I finished. Sometimes we carry things for so long that they become part of us, and we don't realize how heavy they are until we finally set them down. "But what am I supposed to do with it now?" I asked. "How do I respond to something like that?" Mary reached across the table and took my hand. "You don't have to do anything with it. She gave you a gift. She let you know that what you had mattered, that it was real, that the loss of it affected her the way it affected you. That's not a burden for you to carry. That's closure." Her words stayed with me as I went through the rest of my week, seeing clients, helping with homework, attending my son's soccer game. Gradually, I began to understand what Mary meant. Gemma hadn't been asking me to fix anything or change anything. She'd been asking for forgiveness for carrying a secret that had weighed on her for 20 years. And in asking for that forgiveness, she'd also given me permission to forgive myself for the regrets I'd carried too. I realized that I'd spent 2 decades occasionally wondering if I'd made the wrong choice, if I'd let fear override love, if I'd given up too easily on something that could have been extraordinary. Gemma's confession didn't answer those questions. They were unanswerable, but it did something more important. It validated that what we'd shared had been real, significant, worth mourning when it ended. 2. Weeks after the reunion, I did something I hadn't done in years. I wrote a letter. Not an email, not a text, but an actual letter on paper with a pen. I found Gemma's clinic address online and spent an entire evening crafting my response to her whispered plea. I told her that there was nothing to forgive, that we'd both been doing the best we could with the information and emotional maturity we'd had at the time. I thanked her for the years we'd shared, and for having the courage to tell me something that must have been difficult to carry alone. I told her that I hoped she'd find peace with whatever decision she made about moving back east, and that I was genuinely proud of the work she was doing and the person she'd become. Most importantly, I told her that our relationship, brief as it was in the scope of a lifetime, had taught me how to love deeply, completely, without reservation. That gift had made me a better husband, a better father, a better man. Far from being something that required forgiveness, it was something I would always be grateful for. I never sent the letter, not because I changed my mind, but because I realized that the act of writing it was what I'd needed. The letter was for me, a way of processing and releasing 20 years of occasional regret and what-if thinking. Gemma had found her peace in that whispered confession in the parking lot. I found mine in words written to someone who would never read them. Instead, I folded the letter carefully and put it in a box in my closet, next to other mementos from a life fully lived. Photos from family vacations, my kids' artwork from elementary school, programs from plays Mary and I had attended together. Not hidden, not shameful, just part of the collection of experiences that had shaped me into who I was. Sometimes the most profound moments of our lives happen in whispers, in the space between words, in confessions that come 20 years too, late to change anything, but just in time to heal everything. Gemma's plea for forgiveness taught me that some burdens are meant to be shared, some secrets are meant to be spoken, and some loves are meant to be acknowledged even when they can't be pursued. What moments from your past still carry weight in your heart? What words do you wish you'd said, or what forgiveness do you still need to seek or give? Share your story in the comments below. Sometimes the simple act of putting our truth into words is the first step toward finding peace with it. And if this story moved you, please like and subscribe for more tales of those pivotal moments that define us all.